with the Pledge of Allegiance. It's nice to stand up for a minute even. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming. Betty, for the record, we met in executive session to discuss matters regarding collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. Okay, trustees, we will start with action number 3, which is the approval of the minutes from October 25. Do I have a motion? Motion. Do I have a second? All in favor? Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I had a
Mary
small
Ann.
revision for Betty that I emailed her. And I haven't had a chance to check the revised ones.
We'll move on to item 4, which is the report of the superintendent. Dr. Giarezza. Would you like to report? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? So I want to welcome our middle school leadership team tonight and look forward to another comprehensive discussion about how our students are achieving across a broad range of areas at the middle school. We split the secondary, tonight was supposed to be about the secondary report. We were going to cover all 6 through 12. We had a request from the board to split those out into 6 through 8, 9 through 12. We had requests from the administration to do that, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. So here we are, 6 through 8. North Shore Middle School, as many of you know by now, has been named a National School to Watch. That is existing. We had a very strong reaccreditation evaluation this past week. We'll be notified of our status probably sometime in the winter. I am confident that you'll see tonight how our middle school is not only a school to watch, it's a school that works, right? And frankly, it's a school to emulate. Building on the presentation by our elementary colleagues, tonight's presentation will focus on both the quantitative and the qualitative achievement, and I'm really proud of these results and the story that you are about to tell. So a few updates on some open items that we have going on. Firstly, safety and security. At our November 29th meeting, we'll have a comprehensive update on our safety and security efforts. Our visitor management systems are now operational in all of the schools, and we're making significant upgrades across the district, both in process and protocol and equipment. I'm pleased to report that we'll be staffing each school with security for after-school hours. So the elementary buildings will be staffed until 6 p.m. each day, middle school until 7 p.m. each day, and high school until 9:45 each day. So we're going to add a whole second shift to the high school. We've begun working on recruiting a part-time coordinator of school safety, and I wanted to thank the board for your support of this important work. We're making very real progress. Pre-bond services. Our new architects met with our administrators last week to begin the data collection process to inform our vision. We're calling them visioning meetings, and we'll, like I said, to inform what will become potentially part of a larger capital project. We'll be scheduling additional meetings for next week. And then over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll build a community survey. We'll be conducting an information gathering night for the community, and we'll be convening our bond advisory teams. Simultaneously, we're conducting a comprehensive demographic study, building a capacity study, and a cohort survival study to further inform our building use. Finally, we are also looking at our safety and security needs to inform the scope of the overall project. And all told, we'll spend the next 2 to 3 months learning of all these needs and then developing a recommended scope of work to bring forward. Our strategic plan and annual goals, that work is underway. The Homework Task Force had its first meeting, and the committees overseeing the pillars of the strategic plan all have meetings on their calendars. I'm meeting with all those co-chairs and getting those plans in place. On Tuesday, we held a conference day on anti-bias training for the entire district, and then the afternoon was spent learning about topics related to our equity pillar. The work now continues at the building level across the district and throughout the balance of the year. So we have 2 conference days built into the calendar. One is for opening day, one was for election day this year, and then so we don't have everybody together again until next fall. 2019-2020 budget prep. The budget process has definitely begun. We're meeting with our budget developers over the next couple of weeks and months, and then we'll spend time at our next board meeting discussing the board's priorities and objectives, get some direction to me and to Olivia at a high level. We have a million more unknowns than we have knowns at this point in time in the process, so the discussion will be a fairly high-level one for sure. And I will close with wishing a belated happy Diwali to those who celebrated yesterday, and my best wishes for a fabulous Thanksgiving moving forward. Thank you very much. Yes.
So on the professional development, Rob, I saw you sent out a survey to the faculty to participate in. What percentage of the faculty do you get participating in those surveys? It's a survey, just so the public knows, I guess on the particular programs that were given on the professional development day.
I haven't looked recently, but at the end of the first night, we had about 70 people respond to the survey. I could look it up right now to find out for sure for you.
No, I'm not really talking about that particular survey, but I'm
In general,
in general, what percentage of the faculty do you get to respond as to the workshops that were offered and the quality of the workshops?
I would say probably in the vicinity of between a quarter and a half of the faculty K-12.
Is there any way to increase that participation?
We could encourage them, not request them to. Keep on trying, putting out the survey, asking them to do that.
So when you get those surveys back, do you take that into account when you're booking the next year
Sure,
as to
of
what you're
course.
doing
Yeah.
and what you're not doing? Okay, I'd be interested to know what the survey results are when you get them. And we just never looked at them.
Sure.
Anyone else? We'll move on to, thank you.
Welcome.
We will move on to the report from our SGO representatives. Thank you for coming.
Hi, so my name's Kira Kiggins,
I'm Alyssa Day.
and we're senior class presidents, and we came to give a report on the student government. So this year, we're doing fundraisers each month, and we've been planning a lot of those at the SGO meetings. We have ones coming up for the holidays, and each grade, we divide it up, and everyone gets to do a month. So the seniors, we're going to do it in a couple months, but that's what we've been doing. And we'd also, do you want to talk about?
I mean, as a senior class, that's obviously what we're what we're with. So we had our superlatives going, and as far as we're concerned, in the next meeting, we're going to try and host our own fundraiser for the holidays. Thanksgiving is kind of too close, but around Christmas and Hanukkah time is something that we're looking forward to fundraise for our own class, because we have a lot of things going on.
And we're still fundraising with we had a lot of senior clothes, so we did another order form in the fall, and we're packaging those tomorrow afternoon. So that's basically what we've been doing.
Great.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Anytime.
All right. That brings us to, drum roll, our middle school report on student achievement. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. So I am still coming here to you tonight as the most excited principal in the world, just like I was last year. North Shore Middle School is a tremendously phenomenal building. I work with awesome students, really caring and excellent parents, and the best faculty in the world. I think I said to you last year when our team presented our report to you on student achievement that the Long Island Herald, when they interviewed me, when I was new, the title of the article was "Middle School Principal Finds Heaven on Earth," and it literally is heaven on earth. When I wake up in the morning, I think to myself, I have an entire hour drive until I get there, and I wish I could snap my fingers and be there. It really is. I have the best job in the world, and tonight I'm really proud to share with you the work that our students and faculty have done in the last year, and some areas for growth things we're focusing on. So the presentation tonight is structured around the 3 pillars for our strategic plan, focusing first on social emotional learning. We firmly believe at North Shore Middle School that we cannot have successful students academically until we understand them as an entire child, until we understand them as a whole child. We can't have engaged students until we have happy students. So I'm going to focus with you tonight on social emotional learning. Then I'm going to focus with you on the exciting and transformative teaching and learning practices that are taking place, and the professional development that the curriculum directors are really doing great work with their departments. And finally, I'll look at some student data, some areas for growth in terms of equity for different cohorts of students within our building. So first, I want to share with you that last year, something that I did with a group of 10 teachers is hosted a collegial circle on the goal and vision of North Shore Middle School. And we spent some time looking at appropriate adjectives and nouns and verbs that really highlight what it means to have a North Shore Middle School education. And we came up with this statement and some words that we really find powerful and important when we approach our teaching and learning are collaboration, authenticity, commitment, responsible, and compassionate citizens. I think you will find at the cornerstone of a North Shore Middle School education embodies each of those different pillars, and I'm really proud to share with you those different adjectives in action tonight. So let's look at social emotional learning. Something that you should note is this year we have E3 Squad is something that is brand new to our school this year. So traditionally, we've always had a 6-minute advisory that was more or less a homeroom. A teacher took attendance. There were 20 or 25 students in the class. Last year, we had a collegial circle of teachers focused on SEL work. We asked them to redesign what advisory is. We asked students to rename advisory. So now we've got 57 advisories in our school that range from 6 to 12 students. I'm really proud to say that Mr. Nelson and I share an E3 squad of 8th graders. So every day we start our morning with 12 8th graders. It's a great way for us to have a pulse of the building and create connections with students. The work that I'm showing you here comes from CASEL, which is the National Association for essentially Social Emotional Learning, and this was the pillar and the framework with which we designed our curriculum this summer. So we focus in E3 Squad on self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and self-management. And like I said, we believe firmly that once we have these pillars in place, we can really move forward the needle on student achievement. Once our students are engaged and understand themselves, we think they can become really, really productive learners. This is an example, or a snapshot rather, of the curriculum work that we did this summer. So I had a team of 3 or 4 teachers and social workers and counselors work at designing what would be an SEL goal or trait for each month, and then how does that link to one or a few of our shared values. So you see in the month of September, we focused on building a community and friendship, and we focused on collaboration and communication. You should also note that our E3 squads meet for 15 minutes on Mondays and Fridays. So we have our E3 squad advisories, our 10 or 11 students for 15 minutes talking about middle level related issues, talking about current events, talking about how to get along with one another. We also did a survey at the beginning of the year during E3 squad time. This was designed by the teachers who wrote the curriculum, and we wanted to get a sense of how students see themselves and how students see their relationships with other people. So some of these questions say, I won't read them all to you, when working independently, how often do you stay focused and resist distractions? How often do you allow yourself to speak without interrupting others? When you get upset, how often can you get yourself to relax? So we wanted to figure out what do students feel about themselves, and then the work that our E3 squad teachers are doing over the year is, in many cases, not in all, but in many cases, having student-run conferences between September and June and asking students to reflect on these answers and see, did they grow as learners, did they grow as individuals between September and June? Here are some responses that our students did. So for the question, how often do you remain calm even when someone is bothering you or saying very bad things? 48, so almost half of the students said sometimes I remain calm. 30% of the students said all the time. So 50% of students said that sometimes they remain calm. So that's a great indication for our mental health staff as well as our teachers to know that that might be an area that we have to work and explore a little bit with our students on how to help them be calm when they're faced with adversity or faced with crisis. How clearly are you able to describe your feelings? Almost 2/3 of our students say somewhat clearly. So that's an area where we need to explore a little bit. Overall, how much do you feel like you belong at our school? I'm proud to say that 2/3 say they completely belong in the school. 1/3 of the students say they belong somewhat. I am very proud that nobody responded that they don't feel that they belong, but we have some work to do. How can we make sure that everybody is saying that they completely belong? So some plans to improve this area of achievement. We have our school-wide focus on community building. Monthly, I have 2 faculty meetings. One of those meetings is dedicated to E3 squad planning time. So every grade level meets with their team of E3 squad leaders, and they talk about student issues that have come up during the month. They talk about activities that they're going to do and conversations they'd like to explore in the month coming up related to some of the SEL topics. We have a phenomenal student support team led by Mr. Nelson. He works with our counselors, social workers, psychologists, nurses, special education director, and other curriculum directors as needed, and they meet every week to talk about needs of every one of our students. And we have a great, really supportive PTSO. This year, we've shared the results of these surveys with them, and they're helping us. We're looking at bringing in different speakers to our school. We would love, either this year or next year, with their support, to bring in a program called Challenge Day. That is something that we're interested in, and we'll certainly keep you abreast of those different speakers that we acquire. So now that we have happy students, we have students who know about themselves as learners and as individuals, we feel that we can really do some great work in the classroom. So we're going to talk a little bit about the transformative teaching and learning practices that take place. So this first picture is one of my favorites. You might not be able to tell what it is. It's a picture of a pizza folded, right? Like we all eat pizza, right? We fold it up like a triangle. And there's a bucket with a napkin and foil, and this was created in one of our 6th grade design squad classes. And the teacher asked students to identify a problem that they have in real life and to figure out a creative solution to solve that problem. So this group of students said, anytime I eat pizza, I get the grease all over me. So they created a mechanism to stop that grease. The next 2 pictures are from a course we have in 6th grade called Jurassic Investigations. Again, we really believe in authentic learning. We can move student achievement when they are engaged in our classrooms. So our science teacher who teaches this course created a Skype opportunity with the Smithsonian professor. I think it was a week ago or 2 or 3 weeks ago, something like that. It was really, really awesome. And what the teacher focused on was prior to that Skype session, how are you going to measure yourself as a communicator today? And they looked at the different types of questions that they were going to ask, moving from the more basic level of Bloom's taxonomy up to more kind of evaluative questions. So they looked at different question stems, and they evaluated themselves and said, I developed this way or this much as a communicator. I was able to ask really articulate questions of this speaker. Some other examples of our authenticity and collaboration in action. Our National History Day students working on mind mapping to create their research projects. We really, I think the school does a great job with getting students to provide actionable feedback to one another. We spend a lot of time, particularly in our elective areas, but also in ELA, developing students to give warm and cool feedback to one another. So this second picture you see here is one of our science classes. and the teacher is working with a program called Flipgrid. So students record themselves and then share that recording with their peers, and the student who has been recorded says, today I was working on this communication goal or this problem-solving goal. Can you do me a favor and reflect on my video and help me identify whether or not I met that goal? And the final picture is in an art class, students giving feedback to one another based on the particular work that they were critiquing. So we see that this ties directly to our achievement because students are accountable for their own learning and they're helping one another be accountable through peer conversations. Another example, authentic learning in action. The last picture is one of my favorites, even though it's just a whiteboard. One of our 6th grade teachers asked his students at the beginning of the year, can you as a class come up with 2 or 3 goals that you want to work on with respect to communication, collaboration, and thinking? So of his 4 science classes he's got, the first period class said they want to stay focused and on task. They've noticed that when they have conversations, they sometimes are tangential in nature. So that is a goal of these 11-year-olds to stay on task. And he is really proud, the science teacher who did this, of the fact that these students were able to articulate that. So he is seeing direct relation between goal setting and achievement in his classroom. The middle picture, I think, thanks to the work of Linda Binion, our school counselors are doing a great job at creating a really strong bridge between middle school and high school. The middle school students in 8th grade were invited to the college fair this year. It was a really cool opportunity for them. It was designed much differently, I would imagine, than the 12th grade conversation that took place. But this was a great opportunity to introduce students to what is college life like? Why are you going to school? What options are available? Students visited 50 or 75, however many colleges that were there, and just saw the breadth of opportunity. And the first picture here is 3 of our 3 counselors, again, who really do a great job in spearheading a lot of the SEL work that we do. For Unity Day, they worked with E3 squads and they said, how can we create a community of kindness? And again, I said at the beginning of this conversation, we get students to achieve and to engage when we know that they feel belonging, they feel that they belong to a school. Something that I want to share with you about student achievement with respect to our SVOs. A lot of teachers are doing some great work developing progressions specifically related to communication, thinking, and collaboration. This particular progression that is created was a creation by the 8th grade ELA teachers. And if you look at the language, well, first let me preface by saying this was given before a book club talk as part of our Readers and Writers workshop. And the 4 or 5 students who were focusing on the dystopian novel 1984, each individually said, today I want to work and add to our conversation by focusing on 1 or 2 specific goals. So a student might have said, right now in terms of contribution, I am only walking. Right, I'm only contributing 2 or more times. I'd like to eventually get up to jogging or running or sprinting. So sprinting would be sharing a claim. Right? It would be something a little bit more difficult. And the particular ELA teachers who design this do a great job when they're having mini conferences with students and when they're providing feedback at asking, again, peers, can you evaluate your friend? Can you tell him or her, did they achieve their goal? And then as a student, can you reflect, if I interrupted too many times, if I didn't ask enough questions, what can I do next time to reflect on that and to contribute more effectively? This video is a quick example of that in action. You're going to you'll hear a lot of students talking. This is a 7th grade ELA classroom that has a similar rubric. It wasn't the same exact one that I showed you, but this is them doing a literary speed dating. They were trying to convince one another to read a particular book, and at the beginning of the speed date, each partner shared with one another what communication goal they were working on. So you might not be able to read that. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll be able to, though. That's a plug to follow me at NSMS Vikings. What I liked about that was, like I said, at the beginning of the speed date, each student said, "Here's what I'm focusing on in this 2-minute conversation," and then their peer was able to give some actionable feedback. This particular class was a 7th grade ELA teacher and an AIS teacher working together, so both of them were able to visit with students and provide some really good feedback. The next video I want to show you, again, it's only a 20-second clip, but I really want you to see how our authentic learning takes place and the really transformative teaching and learning experiences. The science department is doing really incredible work, thanks to Amy DiMiola and her team of teachers, on the way that I was certainly taught science is much different than how our students are learning science, right? They're really focusing on modeling their learning, on trial and error, the idea of a prescribed lab experiment. I remember, follow step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and it was essentially just, follow step-by-step instruction. That is not the work that is going on in science this year, and in the past few years. So what I'm about to show you is a 7th grade science class. They were looking at their phenomenon was why does a pendulum swing, and when will it stop, and what sort of outside forces might prevent a pendulum from swinging or might cause it to swing longer. And the students had to create essentially their own procedure for answering that question. They had to create their own model for answering that question. So you will see there several student groups designing their own learning. They are, again, having an authentic opportunity to create their own experience, to create their own questions. Each kind of lab group had different questions that they were answering because they were interested in a different, in answering this question from a variety of different angles. We have, again, I said that in order for us to have really solid student achievement, we have to have students who are engaged in their learning. So we have important interdisciplinary projects that take place. So this project was spearheaded by Mr. Gordon and Ms. Rodriguez. It looks at how can students document and archive their thinking in social studies and in art, and can they understand from a different perspective. So rather than just simply take a multiple choice test on a particular social studies concept or unit of study, can they archive their thinking in a different way that will demonstrate their understanding of material. This is a project that really engaged and was a great opportunity for music students to collaborate with students who are non-music students. So our last year band students in 8th grade did a collaboration with ELA 8th grade students, and the piece that they played in their concert, they also read and learned about the author in their ELA class. And the students who then performed that concert were engaged in the work that they were doing because they were asking great questions about, why am I learning this piece? What was going on in the time period that this took place? So with respect to ELA and social studies, what we're focusing on this year and what we'll continue to focus on in coming years is inquiry-based learning. I think you saw that in each of the different examples that we just went through. Inquiry-based learning to drive the research process, writing across the disciplines. Our Writing Center is an evolving opportunity for students to focus on targeted skills and areas for growth. This year we're really proud and excited to have National History Day as an 8th grade research opportunity for all of our 8th graders. No longer is it just an elective for some, and that is a great way for students to develop research skills, because what we have what we're learning in our partnership with the high school is that in order to make students successful, not only for beyond college and career, but for some really rigorous high school courses, whether it be in AP and IB and Regents level in the 9th grade ELA lab, we really want to make sure that they have an entry point in 8th grade. So our National History Day is a great way for that to happen. We have interdisciplinary research focus in grades 7 and 8. These two projects have existed for the last year or two, and this year we're working to develop a research project in grade 6. I want to showcase to you some of the student comments from National History Day, and what they're getting out of the experience and how they are engaged in their learning, and as a result of that, some of the achievement that we'd like to see.
So, how is what we've done so far in HQ are different than
Can you hear?
projects we've done in the past?
Well, it's different because it's for a longer amount of time. It's not like a few weeks, but it's like a few months. And we do a lot more work, but we're more open to different ideas because it's either a topic and we're on to start working the board, a poster, a website, or that kind of thing. So we have like more freedom, and that's the good part about it because most projects, like you usually give you the assignment and you have to do it by this date and then you're free to go. But now we take it step by step through because it's not going to go thing. But with that, there's also a lot of things that we have to add into it and annotate it and explain it. It's just a lot more focused on.
What do you like about it the most?
I like how with the freedom part and then like when we put it all together, it's gonna be like good to see all of our work and then this small part about it. I like how it's compete, but it's just exciting to know that like we're able to build on concept or gain a tool in our school.
What about the most challenging part?
Yeah, but it's just like research in general. Because we have like so many sources, but like we don't really know what to do with all of them. So we kind of have to now pick and choose which one what we want to actually do. And learning primary lessons about the hard because it's been so long ago that no one knows what it is where the primary goes for. It's like the right thing.
What about, you've done research papers in the past, you did one last year. You've done research in this. How is it different? Like, how is this part of it just kind of thing?
Or it's kind of more serious because like we're actually going to work and I feel like when I was doing it in class, I was like, oh, it's gonna feel great, but there's this like one class that you're going to compete in and you really, I want to be able to go and win or go to like that. Yeah, like you want to be good, you have to spend so much time on it already and like you have to being going that like, I don't know, yeah, you don't want to lose that time.
So I apologize if you couldn't hear that, but I'm really proud to say that, you know, our students are really invested in this project. They are picking their own area of history to explore. Some of it's collaborative in nature. Other students are choosing to do a project on their own. And what I really like is the medium through which they are presenting their research is either a traditional research paper or the creation of a website, or the creation of a documentary, or an exhibit. There are a lot of different ways to share research, and I think introducing this in 8th grade will only help build upon the really strong academic success that takes place at the high school. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about some of our test results last year, looking at some areas of strength and then some areas for us to build upon. Also looking at some cohorts of students that we need to improve with respect to their results. So we're going to start with math. 6th grade math assessment, 56% of the students took the exam, so just over half of our students. We are really proud that 88% of the students in North Shore scored proficient. That is almost 30 points higher than the regional score. And 57% of the students scored at mastery level, and that number continues to rise. With respect to local surrounding districts, North Shore students ranked number 2 in proficiency and number 4 in mastery. Like I said earlier, our Nassau County regional gap was almost 30 points higher, so that means that for the majority of school districts in Nassau County, our school district students performed 26 percentage points higher than the average. In 7th grade math, again, about 55% of our students took the exam. We continue to enjoy progress in proficiency. 80% of students achieve proficiency as opposed to 58% in the region. And although we'd like our number of mastery rates to increase, we can see that it over time is increasing. We continue to have about 40% of students, 37% of students achieve mastery. Compared to our comparable schools, 7th graders ranked 8 in proficiency and 10 in mastery, and 21 percentage points above the Nassau County regional gap. So most of our 8th grade students take the algebra course. The students who did not, we had only 4 students take the Math 8 assessment. I did not put that in this presentation to share those 4 particular individual students. So if I'm looking at just 6th and 7th grade, some areas for us to look at over this year and next year, our Hispanic and Latino students, 65% achieved proficiency. Our students with disabilities, 38% of those tested achieved proficiency. And our economically disadvantaged, about 2/3 achieved proficiency. So those are 3 areas that we are going to build upon, and I'm going to talk later on about how we're addressing those. Continuing with math and STEM focus, our algebra regions data, we continue to enjoy very high passing rate, 99%. We are disappointed in our mastery rate last year. You know, it certainly I don't think is a trend. You could see over the course of several years, or 3 years, went from 21% mastery to 66% mastery. Last year we went down to 42% mastery. I was asked to take a look at how our mastery results compare to other Nassau County school districts. That information has not been released to the public, although I will share with you that that our math or our STEM director, in kind of informal conversations, asked other colleagues in other districts how their students performed. We didn't feel it would be equitable to publish that since it hasn't been shared statewide, but other districts did see a dip in their mastery in the last year, and we're not sure 100% why, but we're going to talk about how we're going to address that moving forward. So some plans to achieve improvement. Continue to plan curricular experiences that invite student exploration, and asking students to articulate their mathematical reasoning in different ways. Promote visualization and application of familiar techniques to new challenges and scenarios, and provide a real clear connection to authentic math learning, to real world and real life math, and not just learning math in silos, but how does it connect to other areas. Increasing capacity for content area literacy and writing and journaling about mathematics, building upon the work that has been going on in the elementary schools with Math in Focus. Our 6th grade math teachers last year did some really great professional development with Dr. Yeet Banhar. Yesterday was a professional development day for grades 7 through 12 teachers, working with Dr. Banhar, looking at the way that math is taught at the secondary level. So we are focused on that and making sure that we're continuing the really strong work that we're seeing in the elementary school. We want to focus our efforts on developing strong problem solvers and not just simply solvers of problems. So what are the dispositions necessary to be a good problem solver? We're going to take a look at that in math. When necessary, revise curriculum to ensure that topics are not taught in isolation, like I said earlier, and ensuring that we're focusing on learners who need scaffolds for remediation, but also learners who need more rigor and more enrichment in their classroom. A few examples of how we're trying to improve our achievement. This is an example of a type of test question that a student might be asked. If you take a look at the very final part of the question, it says, Jim believes the maximum whole number of days he can rent the car is 5. Is he correct? Why or why not? So that's a really interesting question because it asks students, like I said, to articulate their mathematical reasoning, whether that be peer-to-peer, so through communication, whether that be through journaling, but it really just asks students to move beyond simply, do you have the right arithmetic working here? Can you really talk and provide some important details about why this answer might be correct? Here's an example of promoting visualization and application of familiar techniques. So when this particular teacher was teaching balancing equations, they actually showed that visual and asked students, what conclusions can you make based on this visual? What questions do you have based on this visual? I want to share with you another quick video segment of a 7th grade pre-algebra class and how this particular teacher introduced a topic with their students, and then I'll talk about that. So what was interesting about this is that this was the first day that this particular concept and unit was being introduced. And rather than the teacher kind of saying at the front of the board, front of the room, saying, here's what we're going to learn about this in this topic, he asked students to go to the back of the room, to look at a visual of a concept, to silently internalize that, to figure out what they were going to do to communicate that concept to their peers, and then they had to share with students in the class what concept was being discussed. At the end of the class, students had to decide what concept are we exploring that builds upon our skills from the last unit, and what questions do we have to deepen our study. So you can see that the way that we are approaching math instruction is much more beyond, it's certainly beyond simply textbook mathematics and arithmetic and solving equations, but building strong problem solvers. And this is another type of example of, this is an example from the Algebra Regents exam of a type of question that is being asked of students. So you can see it is certainly similar to types of questions that are on the SAT. This kind of take a look at these 3 scenarios and decide which student's thinking is correct. So that's really high-level mathematics and high-level content literacy being asked of 8th graders. Living environment Regents data. Still enjoying high percentage rate of students passing. 98% students last year passed the exam. 72% of our students mastered the exam. We're going to shift now to ELA data. In 6th grade, 58% of our 6th graders took the exam. 91% are proficient compared to 65 in the region. And we enjoy a strong mastery level in 6th grade, 70%. North Shore Middle School students ranked number 1 in proficiency and number 1 in mastery compared to our comparable districts in the ELA exam, and 26% above the Nassau County regional gap. Our 7th grade assessment, 73% students are proficient compared to 53 in the region, and 36% of our students performed at mastery level. Compared to our comparable districts, 7th graders ranked number 6 in proficiency and number 6 in mastery. And 8th grade assessment data, 87% of our students scored proficient as opposed to 57% in the region, so that's a 30% gap. And our students, 51% scored mastery. Compared to local districts, North Shore Middle School ranked number 1 in proficiency and number 4 in mastery. An area for improvement for this year is taking a look at our students with disabilities population. Of the students tested, 43% scored proficient, so that is an area that we are looking at to make sure that we close the gap there. So some of our plans to achieve this or improve this achievement, continuing on running records and at specific points during the year, exploring leveled intervention reading approaches to make sure that students have the most appropriate text possible, reviewing next generation literacy standards as they relate to content specific areas of instruction, and something that we are exploring this year and I'd like to explore greater in 2019-20 is shifting how we deliver AIS from solely AIS in the ELA classroom to a combination of AIS in the content area. So this year we have a living environment class that receives ELA support in that class as well. We want to take a look at our approach to reading and writing in an actual content area. Continuing to provide high quality professional development, building on the success of the Readers and Writers Workshop, and creating interdisciplinary partnerships between ELA and social studies. Much of those research projects I showed you earlier live in both of those classes, ELA and social studies. This is an example of writing across the content area. You know, this is a 6th grade science class. You see that students are asked to have a claim, provide evidence, provide reasoning, and really go in depth and articulate their scientific thinking. Create interdisciplinary partnerships, like I said, between ELA and social studies for all of our research projects. The one we're focusing on or hoping to create in grade 6, as well as the 2 that exist in grades 7 and 8. Exploring leveled intervention reading approaches such as LLI to make sure that we get the best and most appropriate books in the hands of our students, and keeping running records when appropriate to see how students are progressing in their reading levels throughout the year. Shifting to world languages, we had almost 80% of our students enrolled in an 8th grade world language class. We enjoy very high proficiency and mastery rates in each of the languages. Focusing right now on Spanish and Mandarin, I think one of the reasons that there are really great results is due to the strong program that exists at the elementary level. This year, you should know, we are shifting our 8th grade Spanish FLACS exam. We're bringing it to 7th grade, because we believe that so much of the work that they're doing in elementary school really benefits, and students are coming to middle school more prepared. So they'll take that checkpoint exam in 7th grade and start high school content work in 8th grade. We'll do that next year with our Mandarin students. The graph that you see here, last school year, 2017-18, was the first time that we administered the Mandarin FLACS exam, and it went very well. In our fine and performing arts, which we are certainly proud of, we have several students, almost 300 students, who perform and receive accolades and demonstrate achievement in that area as well. And finally, I want to share with you the focus for professional development this year. In each of our departments, we are focusing on an area of growth for our teachers. Special education right now is working with a team of consultants. They're focusing in the 6th grade co-taught team and looking at best practices in special education and the co-taught model, and then those teachers will turnkey some of that training to 7th and 8th grade teachers. Last year, I was very fortunate to be able to bring a group of teachers to the ASCD conference in Boston, and 2 of those teachers went to a total of 7 workshops related to co-teaching, and they have done some great work on their Monday meeting time and department meeting time, sharing the results of that. The science department just last week continued its work with Paul Anderson, focusing on next generation science standards and looking at phenomenon-based learning. Math is working with Dr. Yeet Banhar to continue exploring mathematical reasoning. Social studies is doing great work with National History Day, finding partnerships in local school districts to see how they best implement and how they get students to achieve really great results. ELA in 7th grade is taking a look at integrating digital portfolios in order to achieve archive individual student progress. So we're interested in seeing how do students grow from September to June, and how can they use technology to archive their learning. The World Language Department just worked with Joshua Cabral about a month ago. They focused on interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational communication, and the ENL teacher in our school is working at creating essentially an IEP, but it's through a program called Elevation for each of our English language learners, and sharing those language-specific goals with the content area teachers. And finally, we created this year resident expert learning experiences. So we asked teachers to identify what is a strength that you have and what would you like to share with your colleagues. We created a professional development brochure. We had about 25 teachers respond and said, I'm really great at differentiation, I'm really great at classroom management, etc. And teachers during either non-teaching time or team time are visiting one another and looking at the strengths within our building. I leave you saying thank you for continuing to support everything North Shore Middle School. I would love, if you ever have the time and want to see some of this great work in action, to host you on a visit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I thank you for such a terrific and in-depth and very just clear vision of what we're working on at the middle school. It was great to hear it laid out so well. I think we all really appreciated the equity data and the plans for working on that area. And I think many of us feel the middle school is a wonderful place, and I just want to point out, I think one of the wonderful things that didn't make it into your obviously time-constricted presentation is the range of choices that you guys give kids at this point in terms of the cycle classes and the vast array of before and after-school clubs and activities. And I wanted to highlight that just because of the way I think it dovetails with the work people are doing with the strategic planning and giving kids those kinds of options. And I didn't want that to go unrecognized either.
Thank you. And if I can just build on that idea, and this might be speaking prematurely, but that's okay, I think. This morning I met with a group of teachers and curriculum directors, and we're looking at our elective courses, and we are seriously considering making coding a requirement in our 8th grade elective program for next year, so that we can assure that all 8th graders will leave with a knowledge of coding and or computer science.
You know, that's great, because Ed Week had an article today entitled, 12-year-olds hack their school district system and the adults still haven't caught up. It's good. You should read it, before you empower them further. Trustees, do you have comments or questions?
Thank you for the presentation. It was very good. I have a couple of questions for you. I understand on the mastery levels for 2018 on the math and science that those have not been released, but do we have the mastery level comparison on the algebra and the living environment for the prior years? We should have them for the prior years, right?
For the prior years, I didn't include that because I didn't want to not have this most recent year, but I can certainly, if you'd like me to, I can email Mr.
No, I would
Kubicki.
just be interested in looking at that and when you get the information for 2018 as well.
Okay.
That would be something I would be interested in, because no one opts out, right? I mean, other than the kids that have, that elect not to take algebra, right? So that is, to me, much more reliable data on achievement than on something where 45 to 55% of the kids opt out.
Right. So
I don't find that data particularly
does this
reliable.
does this answer your question? These are our results in algebra over the course of the last 4 school years. So in 2015, 100% students passed, 21% mastery.
No, what I was really looking at was the cohort comparison on the mastery level on the algebra regions and living environment regions. I understand why it was included, but you should have the prior data.
Okay.
So I would like at some point if we can get the data, even if it's when 2018 is available, just so that we have that data. It'd be interesting to look at. There was just an article in the Times, I'm not sure if it was last Sunday or the Sunday before, that was looking at the Rejuvenate program in New York City, where they had more social emotional support in it. And I think it's important, but what this article basically said was the Rejuvenate program was really didn't show any increase in the success on academics. I'm not sure I believe all of that because that's a particular group of students, but it will be interesting to see what the academic achievement is on something where there's not an opt-out rate. My second question for you is, can we look at the world language assessments? So I'm interested in how we draw the conclusion that the FLES program in the elementary school relates to the mastery rates in Mandarin and Spanish. Because if you look at the mastery rates, you have some very high mastery rates in Italian and in Latin, which are not taught in the elementary schools. So I'm interested in how we draw the conclusion that the FLES program in the elementary school results in higher mastery achievement.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the responses to that is our decision to move that FLAX exam to 7th grade. We want to do that a year earlier, so this year we're focusing on with Spanish first. Next year it'll be Spanish and Mandarin. We believe that proficiency and mastery rate can be achieved in 7th grade, and that will then provide our students the opportunity to do essentially 9th grade coursework, level 2 in grade 8. So yes, I recognize that 80% of students in French and also achieve mastery, and they don't have the FLES program, so that's why we want to bring it to 7th grade for those 2 languages.
So you will have students who will be taking that exam in 7th grade, and other students will be taking that exam in 8th grade,
This year, if you take...
depending on the language, right? So what happens when they reach the high school? Or are we now saying that the French, Latin, and Italian students are a year behind?
No. So this year will be the only year, I think, that 7th graders and 8th graders in Spanish will take the FLACS exam, and 8th graders will take it in the other 4 languages. Next year, only the 7th graders will take it in Spanish and Mandarin. The goal then is to make sure that perhaps more students would have opportunities to go through higher level courses at the high school. The IBHL and IBSL opportunities still exist for students in French, Mandarin, and Latin, but we are wondering if that can start earlier for students in the middle school. It's not putting anybody at a disadvantage, and from a former language teacher's point of view, it's certainly just something that can help those students, but it doesn't put them at a disadvantage because they still take the assessment at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. Please. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really interested in the social emotional learning component, and I'm very familiar with CASEL. So, and what I find really cool, and I've worked in a middle school, so I know how exciting and curious and enthusiastic middle schoolers can be, and to kind of harness all of what's going on in a middle school. I don't have to go any further explaining that, but they're wonderful children, and it must be wonderful to be able to employ all of these learnings and skills that you're doing. The self-assessment survey, I think, is really novel and cool, because I think we as adults don't give that particular segment of student population much credit for the actual insight they actually have about their environment and how they feel about things. So I think it's really nice that you reached out and you asked them how they feel about how they're performing in school and how they're emotionally equipped to work collaborative. So are you going to give this assessment at the end of the year to see how much they've grown?
Yep, so that's definitely the goal. So I'm not sure, maybe I didn't say this. The E3 squad teacher with his or her 6 to 12 students throughout the year will conference with those students on one of the 15-minute Mondays or Fridays and say, what's going on, how are you doing, and then monitor their progress. So they might see that a particular student responded that anytime I have a crisis, I always yell. So maybe that teacher is asking, have you had any issues this week, in the last month? How have you responded to those? And then at the end of the year, the goal is that more students will respond, that they handled problems and dilemmas more productively. So I can certainly, next year,
That's really nice.
share this, the difference
But
with
it's
you.
great that you're able to target per child, I guess, in these small groups,
Yeah.
what their challenges are and what their needs are, and to help them to grow from that, and to scaffold it using each month, building their skills upon each next. That's really, I really love this.
Cool.
Thank you. And I know I'm a social worker. I'm all about social sciences, and sometimes it's a little hard. You can't attach numbers to these things when you're evaluating, but this is the instrument that you would do it. So thank you for doing that. I have my requisite question about special education. Do you know, could you break out how many special ed students opted out versus did not opt out?
I didn't share that information in this presentation.
I think we had that for the elementaries,
Yes, we
right?
did.
Yeah.
I think it was about 50% of the special ed kids opted out.
I don't want to give you inaccurate numbers
Okay.
by just kind of looking at this, so I can certainly get that information to Dr. Girizzo.
Yeah, I just, because to me, you know, if it's not valid and reliable data for you to inform your work with these students. But I'm confident that I know the special ed teams, you know, they work in the small group setting, that they work with them, they can tackle those. But it would be interesting to know the rate, the opt-out rate for that particular segment.
Sure.
Thanks.
Please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I thought it was excellent. I wanted to comment on the self-assessment survey as well, and I agree with Lisa that it's an excellent instrument. I would just, is it a anonymous survey, or are you able to identify the responses for each individual?
Yeah, we can identify the respondents. So the E3 squad teacher only has access to her or his 6 to 12 students, and can then take a look at those results. If deemed necessary, share those with the guidance counselor or social worker or psychologist, but it's not shared. Faculty. I have access to it.
Is the student aware that it's
Yes.
that it's known what his response is?
Yes, so that's why so the particular grade that I shared with you, you'll see that 120 students responded. That's of the, I shared with you 6th grade. So we have 200 students in our 6th grade. So some students didn't want to, or might have been absent that particular day, but those were the students who felt comfortable sharing that information.
Okay, and that was going to be my other question, because I saw 113 responses. I didn't know if that was school-wide or a particular grade.
It's a particular, I just shared with you one grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when students are aware that their responses are being seen, I'm just looking at the question, how much do you feel like you belong to your school, when that's, you might get something more accurate if that was an anonymous question.
Yep.
Then, and it depends, you might want to consider, for some questions, it being anonymous and
Yep.
letting the kids know that, and for others, that, it's known to the, whoever's looking
Right.
at it.
Good point.
So,
We could actually,
Because it was different in the equity study when we looked at the equity.
it was very different, yeah, it was very different.
through the strategic planning prep,
Yes.
because we could cross.
But not at the middle school. These numbers are very identical to the strategic plan at the middle
Right.
school level.
Okay.
I think if I,
There's also,
we could cross-check
a
that.
number in the, Bob Harrison has a similar
Uh-huh.
kind of measure that you can look
Yep,
at.
absolutely.
Concerning number.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I have a quick question. I'm sorry to retrace.
I'm here all night.
What's an integrated digital portfolio?
Okay, so they're working on integrating a digital portfolio. So, rather than at the end of each particular writing unit or at the end of each particular month, kind of taking your composition paper or, construction paper project and putting it in, a folder, they can use they can use their cell phone, or they can scan the work that they've done. They can scan they can upload their Flipgrid video, and they can kind of archive their growth from September to June. So it's essentially a portfolio from, a portfolio that you were probably, and I was used to in school, just digital now. So students have access to it. They can see their growth over time. I was talking with an ELA teacher a few weeks ago. How cool would it be to have a school-wide, from middle school, grades 6 through 8, a student portfolio and chronicling their growth as a learner from 6th grade through 8th grade. So that's a digital portfolio is essentially a traditional instructional portfolio, but online.
Dave, you want
So,
to add something?
yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rob, and also, you're the front man here, but thanks to your
Yeah.
team also that did all a lot of the work, I'm sure, to get there. Building off of Tim's question, from the equity study, feeling a sense of connection to the school is a huge part of success, or rather the absence of obstacles. But along with that is the idea of each individual student having a connection to an adult in the building. And I wonder if you make efforts as part of a social emotional experience with these kids to try to ensure that, and if that's something that you proactively
Yes.
seek out.
So a few points to discuss there. One thing I think the E3 squads are doing is connecting a student to a small peer community of, like I said, 10 students and an adult. Something that we did at a November faculty meeting last year. We put in our library during a faculty meeting we put the names of every one of our students on an index card. So we had 620 index cards around the room, and we gave teachers stickers, and we asked them to put a sticker on the index card for students that they have a personal connection with. So can a staff member tell me or tell a colleague about that student, or is it just an instructional focus? What we did with that data that we got, so we would see index cards with 5 stickers, 2 stickers, 10 stickers, whatever. Because it was November, we expected, and we did for, I would say, 99% of the 8th graders, we saw many, many stickers on those cards because many teachers, counselors, coaches, social workers, counselors, etc., knew students really well. For the few students in 8th grade who didn't have any, we immediately brought those names to our SST, our student support team. We did some reach out. Can this student be involved in a club? Can we encourage the student to be on a sports team? Can we bring the student up at a team meeting and talk about why we don't feel that we have a connection with the student? The results were different in 6th grade, as you can imagine, because we did the study in November, right? So there weren't as many faculty members who might have been as personally invested over the course of a long time. But we did that's something that we're going to do again this year, likely in January.
And those connections, I guess you'll know more as you do a multi-cohort examination, but those connections will travel with those students throughout their path. For the 3 kids, those 6th graders who are connected, are those connections something that they stay with?
Yes. Yep. And that's something that we're going to explore as a faculty this year. So looking at E3 Squad, we're going to assess is there benefit in next September starting from scratch and, kids having a new E3 Squad class, a new E3 Squad teacher, or is there value in you're going to travel as a 6th grader with these 12 students, or as a 7th grader with these 12 students and this one teacher for your middle school experience. There's a lot of different models in middle schools that do that. The middle school I come from did that for several years. There's pros and cons to that. So we're going to explore that together.
Thank you.
Mr. Dennis, how does the guidance, I'm sorry.
Let me just check
I was
down here
just-
and see if there are any
okay.
trustees that have it, that wanted to ask anything. Rich, Joanna?
Thank you very much for the presentation and for all the work you and everybody at the middle school are doing to help the students. I just have a kind of specific question about one of the slides you had, and it dealt with providing open-ended experiences for students to construct their learning. And I think you even made the comment yourself that when you learned science, you didn't learn it this way, which is true, and the experiences are good. The one in particular that you had presented, I'm just curious about assessment of outcomes. How do the kids know after the fact that they've really gotten the point of the experience?
So, we still provide a range of assessments, whether it be through through labs, through CERs, through kind of multiple choice assessments, through short answers. But one area of focus I know for the science department this year, through their work with Paul Anderson, is taking a look at the work that we have in class, the kind of open-ended questions, the inquiry-based. Is that aligning with the assessments that we're giving, or are our assessments too multiple choice and kind of narrow-minded in nature? So that's an area that the science department is going to explore this year.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much for the presentation and congratulations to the group.
Joanna? Sorry,
And I am particularly appreciative of the passion that you presented your work with. I want to ask some questions about a question about the social emotional learning, and particularly about the E3. There's a very impressive acknowledgement and identification of skills that kids need to be successful. How much practice time of those skills occurs during that time? I'm a believer that I think that we assume children have come to us with decision-making skills. And other than identifying what the skill is, what's the practice time for that?
Yeah, so E3 Squad time is a great time, not only for just kind of organic conversations about what's going on in your life, about real-world current events, but for us to target some of those SVO and social emotional learning goals. So I'm going to give you a quick example. A few weeks ago in my E3 squad, we looked at the activity or the resource book that our teachers designed this summer, and we did an activity during one of our 15-minute days where students were trying to decide, when you communicate, is it better to be a listener or a speaker? And the activity we did was students had to sit back to back, and one student had a picture and another student had to draw that picture but couldn't ask the other student any questions. So that activity took about 3 or 4 minutes to do, and then we asked students, what frustrations did you have not being able to ask questions? Why is it important to be able to ask questions? What kinds of questions do you wish you would have asked? And then as the communicator, what struggles did you go through not being able to hear someone's question, not being able to hear someone's concern? So we do know that especially on those Monday, Friday days when we have 15 minutes of E3 squad, that is the time when targeted instruction takes place with respect to some of those 5 or 6 CASEL components and our SVO work. I'll be really happy to share with you the entire curriculum book that was done this summer and what's done each month with respect to those social emotional learning goals and how they tie to our SVOs.
I would love to see
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Because this is the basis, and, you know, my involvement in the issue of substance abuse,
Yeah.
but this is the whole deal here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we may have some follow-up additional questions.
I just wanted to follow
And then
Dave's
Marian.
question about the connectivity between the staff and the students, and your thoughts about, I know you're creating this and you're digesting how you're going to move through the grades. But I do know, and maybe Mrs. Binion could answer this, about the guidance counselors do move through with the grades. How do they feel their own competence is in this area? Do they feel that they are able to connect significantly with their cohort, their assigned cohort? And if not, I mean, maybe are they doing some work in small groups like the E3 squads at some regular interval to be able to form those relationships, 6, 7, and 8?
Sure. So if Ms. Binney wants to answer, I'll certainly defer to her, but if I can share with you some of my experience with the counselors, the mental health staff, the 3 counselors who do travel with their students have an unbelievable knowledge of every one of their kids. If I were to ask my 6th grade counselor, who's only been with her students for 2 or 3 months, the blood type of some of her students, she would be able to tell you that. I know that, and I'm being sarcastic, obviously, right? Not really the blood type. I know that through the strong planning that's taking place with respect to college and career planning, and with respect to the social emotional learning goals that we have, one of Ms. Binion's goals with her counselors next year is to create academic plans for every one of our students, so that counselors would meet individually every single year with all 200 kids on roster. They do a lot of group work activities. For example, 7th grade, the counselor does some group counseling with respect to decision-making, careers, course selection. So there is a balance, I think, a very healthy balance between individual counseling and group counseling. Ms. Binion, am I missing anything?
I was going to say, in terms of social emotional learning, the counselors have a monthly calendar separate from the one that Mr. Dennis shared with you. And they're really implementing something called Mind Up this year, which is mindfulness and some growth mindset. So they have a curriculum of their own independent of what they're doing with the classroom teachers through E3.
Thanks.
So, it's not really a follow-up question, it's a different question. On the History Day, which I think is great, kids are doing the research because that really was a gap. When they came to the high school and were taking, 9th grade, they take pre-AP World History, and it really was, it really, in many ways, was very difficult for them to master without the foundation. But I'm curious, I'm sure that's a very time-consuming project. Is that done during class time, or is that more an independent work? And how do you manage to do that and cover the curriculum? Because I think the curriculum is pretty significant in history
Yeah.
at that period of time.
So there's definitely a balance that we're working right now in providing students time during class, because many of the projects might be collaborative, some are independent in nature. So we do recognize that we have to provide them with the research skills that they need during class while also finding time to teach the curriculum. But it's important to recognize that the way that assessments are being created in, for example, the 10th grade global history, 11th grade U.S. history, the AP and IB exams, they're all much more process-based, research-based. Can you analyze this information? What sources do you need to make informed decisions? So while we are certainly covering content, I think it is much more valuable to ask students to be able to synthesize information rather than simply memorize a particular fact. This has been a concern. I have a monthly coffee talk with parents, and at my last one, a few parents said, how is social studies being taught if you're spending time with National History Day? So Mr. Gordon, at our next coffee talk, is going to be sharing a presentation with parents, and you're more than welcome to attend to see what work is being done on balancing NHD with the content in Social Studies 8. And Mr. Gordon, am I missing anything?
Sounds great.
One of the curriculums in the middle school for social studies, the 8th grade content is less total years in terms of volume. It goes from after the Civil War to the present day. So we use time this summer to say, how much time do we need to teach the research skills of History Day, and also look at, we're going to choose a topic in depth. So you're going to choose a topic from U.S. history as part of your History Day work, and you will go into that topic really deeply. So we have kids that are going to be, will have some expertise in like Brown versus Board of Education, which will be topics in the 8th grade, and a variety of them. We're going to use them as leverage throughout the year as well. So you're doing deep research into a topic of choice, and at the same time, we dedicate time in the summer to figure out how are we going to still try to provide the richness of the 8th grade social studies curriculum. So when we go from the phase of we've taught a lot of the research skills in class and worked with students, and then now we're starting to transition into the curriculum part of the content, and trying to create space for both within the school year. So we provide that deep research experience, but also the important content. And also now we have a little bit more of these experts within the classroom that can have these skills, but also they're going to really know a topic in depth, where before they would be going a couple of days on topics very fast through the curriculum. Now they'll be better prepared to have this historical knowledge. And the new assessments that are coming out in Global, really for this cohort in the 8th grade, they're going to be taking new assessments which are based on social studies practices. So they're not content-driven questions. They're going to be analyzing primary and secondary sources and reach conclusions. So the work they're doing in History Day is aligned to that type of work, because that's the new assessment model in 10th and 11th grade students will be taking. And it also aligns well with the AP and the IB work the students are doing, because it's based on the new social studies framework, where the older social studies framework will be more just content-driven questions. Now it tries to create more of a balance of content and skill, where it used to be content-heavy, skill-light.
So it's more comparable to the IB curriculum, which is much more skill-based and content-based.
I think it tries to reach more of a balance. I think before, the social studies curriculum previously was much more content-based. In the middle school, it's reaching much more a skill balance and trying to provide deep experiences with looking at the content through multiple sources, rather than here's the textbook or here's the one source that we're going to look at this topic. For the History Day work, they looked at at least 15 different sources about their topic to help try to reach conclusions on it. So they're trying to develop that more informed position, which is common of AP and IB courses, sure, looking at multiple sources, but it's also going to be much more common in the Regents courses too, because they're going to be given primary and secondary sources to interpret world history and U.S. history.
All right, so I have I'm turning that question on its head, because one of the issues that faced the students in the IB curriculum as it was being implemented was there was inequity in how much time was allocated to doing their research projects in class and how much time was at home. So some students were unduly burdened with having that as an extra task, along with their extracurriculars and their other course requirements. So how do you ensure that all of the 8th grade teachers are on the same page, and that no group of students is being unduly burdened with a very heavy homework load in terms of the project.
So we have, as of right now, we have a History Day coordinator, so part of one of our teachers' schedules is to work with all 3 8th grade social studies teachers. They meet with me weekly, and we talk about what students are doing, what's the work going on in the classroom. Probably with the History Day program this year, I'm in weekly, at least in each of the different social studies classes, so I can see at least once per week what's going on in a History Day classroom, in addition to my conversations. We also do bi-weekly 8th grade social studies meetings where we align our work. Our summer curriculum time was all 3 8th grade social studies teachers working and developing this together. So they look at the skills that they're going to teach in these classes together. So we're monitoring what students are saying in terms of workload, of what things are challenging. And we also have reached out to parents and sent us emails. We've tried to be very receptive to any of the feedback about the program. There hasn't been complaints that students are doing too much work within that coursework. We try to, especially at the beginning, because a lot of these research skills are new, we try to teach them in class, provide some practice time, and then you might be searching for sources as a follow-up to then do that the next day. So at the beginning of the project, there is a lot of time where we're doing the work in class. As students start to get more towards the independent stage of looking at developing the projects, we're going to have check-ins and checkpoints with students, and the teachers will be communicating with me and how things are going for our students as part of this research process.
Thank you. I'd like actually at the end of the year to get like a follow-up and
Yep.
see how that worked out.
Our National History Day at the middle school is January 31st, and I'll definitely invite all of you to be there. You can see the exhibits, the websites. Something that I'm very cornily happy and excited about, I don't know if that's a word, is we're going to be having this, in order to communicate with staff members and the community, a segment called Teachers in Cars Getting Coffee. And one of the first episodes of that, it'll be about 5 minutes in length, will be me driving around with the 3 8th grade social studies teachers talking about NHD. That will hopefully come out in the first week of December, and I'll make sure that you all get that.
Thank you.
I really just cannot even wait. That just sounds fantastic.
Is our auditor here to get a new revenue line for the advertising we're going to sell on that?
Exactly. I do think the History Day thing sounds like a terrific experience, and I have to say, it reminded me of other conversations we've had, because we've had a couple of kids in the past that have been very successful with the videos in particular, and we've been talking a lot about recording equipment
Yes.
and what our needs are
Yes, we have.
there, and it occurred to me the other day that we should include History Day as part of that conversation.
So we are.
During that, I was thinking, in the elementary presentation, they presented the fact that on the ELAs, there was a gender gap that was pretty significant. It might have been even
We did
10
not see that.
points.
We looked for that as well.
Because
we-
a few years ago, the middle school presentation,
yeah.
there was.
We did, maybe 3 or 4 points, but nothing that was discernible. If I were to reflect on each grade, it was something like 4
I'm
or
not
5.
asking you to
Yeah.
spontaneously, yeah.
But it
That-
wasn't something that we noticed.
I can
Interesting.
say we did look to address that
Yeah.
in those years. One of the things that we started to do was look at the library collections in classrooms to see if they were very book-friendly. And I know the teachers have recommended some titles that we had been carrying. Paul Valpone had some books that were very kind of good, that seemed to resonate with the boys. So we looked to change some of the collections to try to encourage the boys reading. And so we had some efforts in that area that I'm sure was part of, what we hope were part of the things that just create more interesting options for kids as we go to classroom libraries.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Good. We have nothing else, but thank you.
Okay, and if I didn't already thank my phenomenal team, I probably didn't thank them enough. But thank you to Linda and Seth and Amy and Brendan and Julie, and certainly Dahlia and Anna, who are not here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, where are we? All right. That brings us up to comments from the public. If anyone would like to address the board, if you would come to the microphone and give us your name and town of residence.
Thank you. Simple question. With regard to the social, emotional, oh, I'm supposed to be looking at you guys. With regard to the social, emotional, are we incorporating for the students learning how to advocate for themselves? As middle school is part of, like, it's the cream and the cookie. The parents are learning how to step back during these years, and we're actually expected to have stepped back by high school. So did I miss, is that one of the skills that, is that one of the skills that we're
I'm going to say
addressing?
yes, and I'm going to let him give you some
Thank you.
details because he's an
Advocacy and self-advocacy is certainly a goal of middle school students. I forget off the top of my head right now what month we're focusing on that. I think it might be March or February, but that is certainly one of the SEL goals for students. So we kind of work on communication and collaboration skills and problem-solving skills at the beginning of the year, and then towards the end of the year we work on goal setting, reflective practices, and self-advocacy.
And just one other question, since we had the elementary school presentation a couple of weeks ago, and now we had yours, which was wonderful, sort of being the cream and the cookie. Do we take, after we hear an end-of-year kind of assessment, does the middle school then take into account the areas in need of growth from the fifth graders, and then sort of incorporate, knowing that these are areas that their kids are coming in weak, and perhaps making a little focus to strengthen those areas? And then do you, with the high school, collaborate so that those areas that you find the 8th graders are in need of improvement on, does the high school then pick that up? Do we have that continuum? Peter? I mean, Dr. G. Rizzo?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That is the exciting part of the meeting. Everyone's, of course, welcome to stay if they wish for the regular business.
Thank you all very much. Good job.
And happy Thanksgiving.
All right, we will move on. We're up to action item B, which is personnel. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Moving on, action C is approval and amendment to an agreement between North Shore and a former tenured teacher. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Action D, appointment of our audit committee members. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Second. I extend gracious thanks to their volunteerism. Yes, Miriam?
It's sort of related, but not exactly on this. We don't make a motion to accept the audit report.
I was considering that same thing.
So I was looking through here to see what's in there if I missed it, and we have the audit, but
It's not here.
But we really, after this, we should make a motion to amend the agenda to include a motion for the board to accept the report of the auditors.
I think it's possible for this one, where he indicated he was going to change some wording. We're actually going to have to accept it at the
Again.
next meeting.
At the next meeting, okay.
But not to detract from your point. You were correct, but this time, I think we'd have to do it next time. All right, all in favor of the audit committee members? Thank you. Action E is an acceptance donation from the Glen Head School faculty to the Glen Head Elementary School for a plaque in the Century Garden honoring Nancy Frank. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, and thank you for the donation. We are up to action item F. We're approving budget transfers. We are approving budget transfers in the amount of $92,000 to cover tax anticipation note interest and retroactive pay. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second. Questions or comments? Oh, it's just me. Okay. I wanted to ask about, which we discussed some, but I wanted to ask in public. of the budget transfers, I think 23,000 is to cover additional interest on the tax anticipation notes, and we had a conversation about how interest rates had gone up. I had some concern about our ability to anticipate that and it being early in the year. Could you tell us the 23,000, what exactly it will cover? And I'll point out, and I noticed too that we had a budget transfer back in July that actually took money out of the tax anticipation
Yeah,
notes.
because we sold the notes around September. At that time, within September alone, or between August and September, I think there were one rate hike, and the market was going very crazy. We are really, when it comes to short-term notes, you are tied to what the Fed does. So, and there has been since last year, when I did the budget, there has been at least 4 rate hikes, and that is what is affecting it. Because when I was preparing the budget, I did not know that there was going to be 4 rate hikes in a year. But
You thought there'd be something, but not.
yes. But on the other hand, we have to look at it very carefully. On our revenue side, we also get money when the rates go up. We have been, since January of this year, the interest rate that we've been earning on our investment have really increased. So when you put it on balance, we are getting more revenue from interest income than what we are paying on the tax anticipation notes. So to me, this is really good for us.
Right. I'm thinking, in planning terms and how we look forward. The 23,000 covers what we anticipate to be
We
the
already
additional
purchased
insurance
it.
for the
We already
length of,
purchased it. It's
for the
going
length of the
to-
note?
Yes, we already purchased the notes, and it's the interest that we are going to pay. Even with the premium that we got, it's about 2.12%, and it is 1 basis point higher than we did last year.
Yeah.
So it's 100% increase in the cost of borrowing because of the 4 rate hikes.
Good times. Are there?
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? So for the money that we borrow in to have in case cash flow becomes tight, typically we dip into those, we don't, like that cushion, we do.
We do because we don't start collecting taxes till the end of October.
Okay.
So that's when the cash flow gets very low. Between September, when we have teachers come back and we have to pay them, and the end of October, when we start receiving the taxes.
So even though we're dipping into them, we're still making enough money on the remaining principal to offset?
No.
Yeah.
What we make
On the
money
whole-
on is when we start receiving the taxes.
Okay.
October.
Gotcha.
The largest amount of money comes in January.
Gotcha.
And we start buying, short-term CDs and.
So once the coffers are up, then we can, okay.
Correct.
Okay, very
So
good.
that's how we make the money back.
Good. I had a separate question also. In the list of budget transfers that are kind of more minimal, that don't need approval for us, there were a couple lines transferring medical services to BOCES, and I think I had asked about this in advance just to have some preparation. I don't need an answer now, but just curious, is this something, it seems like we do that
No.
typically.
Yes, what happened was, some of those services we're going to contract out, and then we call BOCES, and BOCES is going to do it. And typically when we go through BOCES, the advantage of going through BOCES is that we get a little bit of state aid. So we prefer to go through BOCES. We transfer the money from where we budgeted it from BOCES, and this is the first time that BOCES is going to do it. So we decided to jump on it because of the state aid component.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any other discussion, trustees, on this? All right. All in favor? Thank you. Action G is the approval of change orders. We have a deduction of $15,000 from the bond referendum projects Phase 3 at the Seacliff School, a deduction of $22,500 for the same projects but at the high school, and one more, another deduction of $12,460, also projects at the high school. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Do you have any questions, concerns?
No.
All in favor? We're all good with deductions. Action H is the approval of the agreement between North Shore and Savin Engineers. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
A second?
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you. Action I is the approval of an agreement between North Shore and New York Therapy Placement Services. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Action J, approval of agreement between North Shore and Millneck Interpreter Services. Do I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Questions, comments?
I have a quick question. Does BOCES provide interpreter services for those who are hearing impaired?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Find out.
And it's one of those things that if they don't, it's sort of like, could they? Right.
Could- I-
Right?
I
You know,
don't
it's
know
like,
if
it's
it
not
even
like they
occurs.
never
Yeah.
Seem like it's up their
add
alley.
services to their, you know.
I mean, I know they provide translation services. And this is a type of translation service. So I was wondering if they provided that, but I'm sure Millneck does a fabulous job. I'm familiar with their work.
We're not saying that. Would be interesting. Any other questions? All in favor?
We'll find out the answer to that.
Great, thank you. Action K is the approval of the piano accompanist for the district-wide concert. So I have a motion.
Motion.
A second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? Action M is the approval of our MOA with CS Architects as Architect on Record on miscellaneous and ongoing projects. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Questions, concerns, comments? All in favor? Action M is the approval of the agreement between North Shore and Jean-Paul Gonzalez for E3 Day. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Questions? All in favor? This brings us to our second opportunity for comments from the public. If anyone would like to address the board, podium, name, town of residence.
Denise Reiner, Glen Head. This question is for Mr. Klobicki. Going off of a point that Marianne made when you said that the surveys from the professional development, that you only had 25% around or 30% response. How much do we spend on, I'm sure you don't know it off the top of your head, but it's within the budget that the community pays for the professional development.
Yeah.
So can you explain to me, like in certain other areas, professional areas, there's mandatory professional development and you get credits and you maybe need a certain number of credits a year, and then there's a survey at the end, and in order to get the credits you actually have to do the survey and you have to pass an exam so that there's an assessment of whether or not you learned what you were supposed to learn from it, and all of these with as far as fiscal responsibility and the fact that the community pays for the professional development. Have we done anything to ensure that the professional development is worthwhile, and are there goals, and what is the participation, and are there a certain number of credits that the faculty must take? Are there incentives to do the professional development?
There's a whole host of
I was
questions
gonna
in
say,
there, and we could spend the whole evening on
professional
that.
development is
How about
vast.
how about just a couple of minutes talking about the fiscal responsibility and what we're doing to ensure that my tax dollars are actually being spent in a productive way that benefits the teachers and the kids?
Talk about maybe just the conference day piece of it in the survey that prompted the question, or we
Sure.
can defer
Yeah,
to.
definitely. I mean, the survey, yeah, right. So the surveys, you know, we try to get high responses back on surveys, but it's hard for us to compel people to take them. We send reminders, and that was that. With regard to I'll let Rob speak to how we choose a theme for a day of staff development. for a staff development day, and then the process for how we find speakers and all that. So you want to
Sure.
right?
Yeah. In terms of choosing a theme for the day, the theme for this past superintendent's conference day is bringing to life and bringing to reality, I guess, to accomplishments, the strategic plan. So we look for professional development in the 3 pillars of the strategic plan: teaching and learning, social emotional learning, and equity and access. We had put out a questionnaire to the faculty asking if any of them would like to host any kind of workshops related to those 3 themes to share practices with colleagues. Of the, I think it was 17 or 18 workshops that we ran, we had only 5 external presenters, so the rest of them were internal presenters from the school district. Of those 5 external presenters, again, each of them were in areas of one of the pillars of the strategic plan, and many of them were referrals made either by teachers or by organizations in other school districts within those areas of the pillar. All that, of course, is in line with our budget. We have there's a budget line, I'm sure you know, and you'll see, for professional development for teachers. The one piece that I want to kind of clarify is there are no requirements of teachers to do professional development. The only place that there is one, and this is new with the state ed, is that teachers who possess what's called a professional certificate, not a permanent, so those of us who are old enough, our certification is called a permanent certification. People coming out of college, and I would have to look back, I don't want to give you a date, but as of a certain year, they were no longer offering permanent certifications, but professional certifications. There's a requirement by the state that in order to maintain your professional certification, that you have to complete, in this case, it's 100 hours of professional development. The state has become much more stringent on that professional development. They do not allow teachers to collect any of those hours or apply any of those 100 hours unless they're state-approved professional development agencies. I have my own opinions about that, but the way that an agency becomes state-approved is that they submit a $650 check to the state to be considered as a agency that can provide professional development, and they either receive or don't receive. There is a site that we go to see, and the teachers go to actually to see if where they select their professional development from is on that state-approved agency list. All that being said, we require as a school district of teachers to do professional development over the years. So even though that 100 hours is particular to professional development, to teachers with professional licenses, not the permanent, we expect/require teachers to complete 100 hours. By the way, that 100 hours is 100 hours over a 5-year period of time. It's not 100 hours every year. We require at the end of every year for teachers to submit what professional development they've accrued over the year, and then we document that and keep that in their personnel file in terms of what professional development they've done throughout each of the years, even though they're not required to do that because of their certifications. So teachers also, there's an incentive to do professional development because clearly the more credits teachers accrue, that impacts their salary scale. And so as they accrue those credits, they move over in the salary lanes to a higher level of payment. At some point, everybody will max out with that. So if you look at our salary scale, we have the PhD lane, but which most people probably won't reach. But there is a master's plus 75 credits beyond your master's. Those credits can either be earned through coursework with a educational institution, college, university, but those 75 credits can also be earned through what we call in-service credits. And it's for every 15 hours of education for these in-service credits, a teacher receives 1 in-service credit. So in order to get 75 credits, it's 75 times 15, if you think about it that way. It's a quick summary. Tracy.
Rob Mazzella, go ahead. Just a quick follow-up on that. Is Masters plus 75, is that a generous compared to other teachers in surrounding districts? I've always heard Masters plus 60 has been the max from a couple of districts that I've heard of. Just curious where we stand.
I don't know if I would, call it generous or not generous. It's part of a negotiation with teachers. I know when I first arrived here, we did not have a Master 75 column, but I think it was in this last contract, or last two contracts, that there was an MA 75 column put in.
And just one other thing in terms of the teachers. After 6th grade, there is no opportunity, I don't know about high school, but in middle school, there's no opportunity for parent-teacher conferences. Is that something that can, or were we thinking about addressing that in the next teacher contract?
We haven't talked about it actively, right, as a concept.
Like I'm just curious why there is no opportunity for parent-teacher conferences after 6th grade. And it seems to me a little bit unusual.
Rob, I don't know.
No. Just a couple
in most cases in that I've ever worked in with parent-teacher conferences at the secondary level, they are very, very short periods of time that you get with teachers, and so the 6 to 7 minutes that you might get with a teacher, it doesn't always yield the same kind of value that our teachers would just make themselves available to any parent that would want to meet with them. So so we would balance the loss of an instructional day with the benefit of the conferences.
Just one point of clarification. When you were speaking about the cost of short-term borrowing versus the revenue from short-term investing, was that a partial offset from the revenue side, partially offsetting the cost, or was that a complete offset?
One of them is an expense and one of them goes to the revenue side.
Sure.
So I was looking at it, in terms of, in the end, it all flows into fund balance.
Okay.
I think part of it is we're only borrowing the 5 million, right? And then because the cash flow
You have more to invest.
and then the tax revenue comes in, and of course the whole tax levy is 86 million. So,
Sure. No, I was just curious if it completely offsets or if it was just a partial. Just in terms of interest rates, and there is no projection that they're going to continue to stay this low. The long-term projection is that they're going to go up. What is the percent of our budget that goes towards interest payments? And as old debt comes off the books and gets replaced with new debt, how much would you expect that percentage to increase in the future?
I can't give you a definite number because it's all, because what we are going to sell them is exactly what is at the market on that particular day. And of course, it's based on your district's profile. That's what we are going to do. But I expect it to go another.
I think you're asking in terms of the bond, right? So I think what are we looking at, 800,000 coming off next year in terms of interest payments out of the budget line?
It's not just interest and principal.
It's interest and principal, right? So, and that varies from year to year depending on the type of work and whether we float another bond and how much the bond is. So the number, we have an idea what we will have available next year, but we don't have an idea of what we would have in terms of interest payments for 2021. Well, because we'd have to see whether a bond passes in 2019 and the amount of the bond and what the projected interest rates are.
But to her point also, there's always the call feature in all our notes. So when the interest rate go down the road, we refinance. And we've refinanced all our debt.
Thus far, that's been a great strategy, but it's not right going forward. It's gonna
Thank
be a
you.
while. I was trying to look. I find what the debt. I'll tell you afterwards.
The percentage.
if I find it.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the public? Okay, I think we're going to move on to old business. We had noted the first item we wanted to revisit was PSAT testing. Dr. J. Rizzo?
Right, so this is, we talked about this at our last meeting. We'll do some follow-up on this. I just wanted to get some feedback from the board on information that you would like to have to help move this along. And then I can start working on it.
Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to know what other folks in the quadrant are doing.
So I've spoken with, we had a quadrant meeting today, actually. It wasn't heavily attended. There, of the 5 districts that were there were 2 of us who were administering the PSAT to all 10th and 11th graders. Another district that is wanting to move that forward, and the other 2, were not. At this point in time, they were doing them on Saturdays.
One moving our way, you said?
One would like to, yes.
I've looked up that information. And the ones that I've seen that do it are Oyster Bay is the one that I could find that
Yep,
that
that's
does
the
it.
one.
And then Jericho, Great Neck, Herrick's, Manhasset, Roslyn are the other ones I looked at. None of those administer it on the Wednesday.
Right, they do it on Saturday.
Right.
So is it helpful if I work with the high school administration on the pros and cons of why we do it, bring that to the board, and then with a recommendation? Because that was sort of what I had in my mind's eye about
Right,
how
what
to bring this
were our
forward.
goals when we made the
Right.
change, and how has that
Yes.
worked out for us?
Okay.
Downsides, challenges?
Yep, absolutely. All right, we'll take care of that. Thank you.
We also know that we had a discussion where we created a long list of items LAC could work on, and we need to narrow it down for them slightly. You guys all have, does everyone have the list from before? Let's start with anything that should be added to it. For me, I think the off-year legislative breakfast in a kind of super LAC setting on the years that we're not having the big community legislative night seems important. It's been very successful in the past, so I'd like to add, we'll call it the legislative breakfast, if you don't mind. Is there anything else that we left off the list that you guys would like to add before we try to narrow it down? Okay, so that was just me. All right. Let's try, if we're going to try to get to 3 to 5, let's try everybody give me your, whatever you feel very strongly about. How about, aim for about 3.
Do you want to speak to the elephant in the room, which is APPR and the latest news on the
I think that's a good
moratorium?
point. Yeah, so I think that's an excellent point. When we put APPR on the list, even since that discussion, right,
Right.
it appears they're going to have another year's moratorium on using the test scores in, with regard to APPR. So I certainly think it's less pressing than it was.
But I don't think we should kind of keep it in our close back pocket. And we have a new state senator in our midst.
Yes.
That it would be fun to know.
It's the kind of, which is why you want to have
What
the
his thoughts
legislative-
are on this,
Which is why
yes.
you want to have the legislative breakfast, right? And
Yeah.
there you can certainly talk about a wide range of things, but what are the big priorities?
The short, long term.
Just following up on that, not in terms of really priorities, but I think something like APPR, the tax cap, that is NISBA legislative talking points. Those are items I think you can sort of put under LAC doing updates, right? They would be good items that we've looked at before, trying to keep updates on the news. And I think it would be helpful for LAC to have like a mission as to what we really want them to work on and what we would like them to keep us apprised of. And then if with the members, if we could maybe work with Cheryl in terms of would there be members who would be more interested in doing the research on particular topics and providing an update to the board. So just like we said about the moratorium on the APPR, that would be something that would be interesting. I think Jim Gorin has said that he is against tying teacher assessment to the APPR, what I read in his literature.
Okay, that's perfectly reasonable. There's working on versus keeping us apprised of. We need to narrow down what we want LAC to work on. Does anyone wish to share their priorities there? Yes.
I think a priority would be American Water, because I think that's a particular interest to the community, and creating a liaison with the civic groups, and working collaboratively with them. I would tie 3 and I think it was 7 together into one item.
Okay. Who else would like to point to a priority?
I've always supported the creation of a TRS reserve.
Yes.
And
Lisa?
I
Big
would
priority?
agree- I would agree with the New York American Water grouping, merging 3 and 7. I like the idea of the updates of APPR, even the tax cap. It's nice to know what other districts across the state are, ideas that they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gabe?
So I think I like the framework that Mary Ann suggested in terms of having subgroups within the board, within the committee, with regard to APPR and other issues like that. I think that could all be grouped under the idea of an Albany update team to keep us informed with what's going on upstate. And if we had a subgroup of 2 folks who were really going to focus on that to give us the information as to what's happening, such as, there seems to be a movement within that moratorium to keep it the way it is, or that's what the scuttlebutt is, or however that they're seeing it, to inform us as to what's going on so we don't let things slip under our noses.
Okay.
Also,
Let's.
sorry.
We'll come back.
I think the tying of 3 and 7 together would be a good idea. I think that would be probably very beneficial for the community. I didn't really think much about TRS reserve, but after listening to the auditor tonight and thinking about it, I think that's actually probably a good way to go as well.
Okay. Joanna, you want to pick something?
Yeah, I agree with linking 3 and 7. Obviously, number 5 jumps out at me. We've created a whole generation of nicotine-addicted children, and I think working on laws specifically as they relate to proof of purchase for substances like nicotine is very critical.
Okay. From my point, I'm going to say, having a legislative breakfast where your school leaders are able to be in the room with your local legislators is important. And I can't disagree with the creation of the TRS reserve or New York American Water, although I see the liaison with the civics or any group as just is not the priority, but the technique, right? Like we have things we need to do in our regard to, as stewards of taxpayer funds with New York American Water, and we can pursue that. They would pursue that in whatever way.
So what I was going to suggest, the TRS reserve was something that I had brought up, and we had spoken about that, but that is also something that NYSBA and LAC have also worked on, and I would think something like the exemption from the tax cap calculation for the school safety, since school safety is on everyone's radar. To me, there should be like another grouping. Here I am grouping things. It keeps my order.
Get everything going just by grouping.
I have to do groupings. It's like I put my socks in color order. But the school safety exemption from the tax cap and elections to schools, these are really hot topics.
Just call them all.
And
It's
those,
safety in a way.
yeah, and so those are things that I think would be really prime for SuperLAC.
Correct.
Because there's something that is equally affecting all districts. So,
Well, and Garden City came to us about it months ago. with a
right,
very
so,
specific proposal.
so, I mean, when we're talking about what LAC wants to focus on, if there are topics that are really coming in with SuperLAC, obviously that, as we are part of that, that is also going to take precedence, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel, is my point. So I think in terms of setting priorities, I think the first thing we need to do is find out what SuperLAC is doing. Or are they not doing, or do we want to spearhead it? So if we're talking about school safety in terms of elections and getting an exemption for the hundreds of thousands, do we want to give that as a priority to LAC to reach out to other districts
Yeah.
to join in that effort?
Mayor?
Right, because the superintendents have all
So
brought it over with SuperLAC.
Yeah, so I've spoken with both superintendents from Garden City and Manhasset. We've agreed that probably the three sort of big things to zero in on that we would bring back to our boards and districts are, number one, school safety, exempting that from the cap calculation, the elections in the schools, and the creation of the TRS reserve were three areas that we thought we could all work on with purpose and.
Okay.
So those should really go in the SuperLAC bucket, is my point.
Can you
Yeah,
explain
we
the
can still work, you know.
Right, but
Right, so what the three of us talked about was having the two work simultaneously. So there would be some work happening at the LAC, the local LAC, and then some higher level work happening with SuperLAC.
right, so, but that influences what we're doing
Yep.
based upon the numbers of
Absolutely.
members and what's going on, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, this is something that we should discuss, or I can discuss with Cheryl in terms of how does she want to allocate her members, right? So she may have a team that works on those three issues for SuperLAC and works closely with SuperLAC and will attend the SuperLAC meetings. She may have another team that works on the American Water and liaisons with the civic associations and attending the civic meetings. That's, you know, I'm just trying, I think people were very frustrated at, we weren't, I think, task-oriented enough in the past couple of years, because we didn't really have the same motivation where LAC was originally created with the letter writing campaign for LIPA. So I think if we gave them some direction as to how they may want to allocate the resources, it might be helpful for them to make the group manageable and take advantage of the number of members.
Yeah, I think subcommittees won't be a hard sell.
Correct. On that note, I just want to be clear, no one has said the word LIPA since we started this conversation. Are we really ready to just not look at that? I'm not advocating it per se.
We don't have something for them to do right this
Okay, so we
minute,
want to make
but
sure
then it's very likely, right, that at some point we have to come back and say, hang on.
Okay.
I could be wrong. Tim, do you?
Well, I was just on number two. Is that the general movement now? Is that people want to get elections out of schools?
NISBA has been pushing.
Not all elections. Not all elections. This is the primaries and the generals, right?
And
Right,
and
because
and
there's
school
legislation
school board elections as well out of the schools? I mean,
No, because what it actually says is it wants to give schools the ability to make their Board of Elections hear arguments about why a particular school is not a safe location for an election. It's not even just like a blanket thing. It's like specifically you can say, in this school, I can't secure, people have to wander through the whole school before whatever it is, to make the argument and so that the county boards of elections can't just sort of dismiss it out of hand.
okay.
Right. So right now the county
For better or
said.
worse, I'm just saying that's what it is.
Right, so right now the county says we have 3 polling places in North Shore, middle school, Seacliff, Glenwood Landing, right? So we make that work. We try to secure the area off. It's much more complicated when we have school in session than when we don't have school in session, but we have figured that out to a certain extent. The school board election and budget election, that happens at the high school. And so that, when I looked at that, the use of that facility last year, it's a lot easier for me to secure people coming in and out of that portion of the building, right, than it is for me to have, if I did the school board election at the Seacliff School, it would be, harder to get people, around and that sort of thing. So.
You have people driving through the middle of your campus.
Right, so the function of this is, as like Sarah said, was to think about, be able to have some say in how our schools are used, if at all, right, for general and primary elections, right, when children are there. The counter argument from the Board of Elections has been, we're not even going to talk to you about this until you take your school elections out of your schools. Right. So this has been, and some have talked to me about this within our own district, and they would like the board to take this up at some point. But it's an issue that's important to all the superintendents that I've spoken to. It comes up regularly. We have a liaison. The Nassau County Association has a liaison to the Board of Elections to try to shape this.
Right, so I vote at the Conley School in Glen Cove, and they have a similar setup to what we have at the high school. There's a separate entrance into their gymnasium from the outside, so you do not enter their primary building to reach the polling place. But even with that, I will say it was a rainy day. The parking lot was a nightmare. We were inconveniencing parents. There were parents hanging out sort of like in front, the people going in, voters hanging out. And if I were a security person trying to secure the outside, I would have no idea who belongs and who doesn't belong, and who could be a threat and who would not be a threat. And I'm sorry, when you wake up in the morning and you see 12 people shot in a nightclub, it's every day. Every week, there's a new tragedy. So, and we're spending all this money on security. To me, I don't really like the idea of people walking in and through an elementary school to vote. I mean, I want to encourage people to vote. I just don't want to put our students in jeopardy. And it's disruptive, right? How are you going to conduct class when you have people coming in and out of your building?
As a social studies teacher, I always see it as a teaching moment, actually. But.
And we closed this year.
We closed on Tuesday, had everybody at the high school. For the primary, we did not close. No, the primary we had, school was
I wouldn't support the moving of our elections. I think it's symbolically really difficult to ask people to come and have their say on a school and yet not let them into our school. I just don't think that's right when we are letting them in for sporting events and plays and musical performances and inviting that. Suddenly, the one time they get to have a say in how the school is run, we say no, we're concerned about the general public coming in here. So if the thrust were to somehow, either through SuperLAC or through our own individual efforts, to get the Board of Elections to understand that that line they've drawn in the sand isn't workable and to think about it another way, then I would support that being a priority for us. But I'm not sure that's necessarily the best use of the people who volunteered for us.
I mean, I think we all want elections to be accessible,
Mhm.
right? To be in an appropriate facility where people can park and everyone can easily access the building and not, right, hiking up the stairs and, take groups or something. All those pieces are important too. But it does seem entirely possible that some of our locations are better than others.
That's my point. Not that I don't
Right.
think, I agree with you, Tim, it's a teaching moment, but a teachable moment, and I also agree with Dave that, you don't want the budget vote to be outside, but we do want to be able to designate where people are coming in and out of our buildings. I mean, that's what we're talking about in our security analysis.
Exactly.
Designating where people come in and out of our building, single points of entry, right? And, I don't know, I just think that, today, school safety is is on my mind. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds.
Just building off Mary Ann's point, we're spending so much time and effort to think about how we're doing that, and then to say 2 times a year, we're just,
We're throwing it all out the
giving it to
window.
someone
The
else.
hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
dollars we spent is now gone out the window.
Just to be clear, on the budget vote days, we create a single point of entry for
Right.
one building.
For the one building.
for the one,
Which
right.
to me is acceptable
Right.
and positive.
But we also create a single point of entry, so for the voters, right, on this past Tuesday, we created a single point of entry for them to use the building, and then we put security so they couldn't get in, they couldn't move. Anybody there would not be able to get into the school at large based on where they were. So we cobble together a plan to make that happen. When school's in session, right, we have a single point of entry for kids and teachers, and then we have a single point of entry for the voters, and it just gets much more complicated.
It's onerous, and in essence, it's an unfunded mandate. I mean, we're being forced to do all of this, and
Right, you do, right. You have to get the extra security.
I think
you
it-
have to do all the, right.
I think it would be a good, I believe it would be a good use of LAC's time to spend time thinking about how to provide schools with some say in this. Right?
Right.
Sorry, it's not public comment. Can I just ask a quick question about this? Why couldn't we do
I don't
a
think we
budget
can. We've denied, yeah, other opportunities. We really have to restrict it to public comment. I'm sorry.
All right, so how are we doing here?
I think we got one.
What?
What's
I
that?
think elections in schools seems to be a
And what about the school
somewhat
safety?
consensus topic.
Well, could we, what I said, well, could we sort of direct that we have a subcommittee for the 3 topics, school safety, for the tax cap, election in schools, and TRS for work on LAC to work in conjunction with Super LAC, right? And then we could have another group that works on the water issue, from both us being exempt entity and working with a tax exempt entity and working with the civics, right?
So
And so that gives you 4 topics, right, for them to look at this year. And then,
I think I might have gotten lost. We're going to have a legislative breakfast though, right?
Well, that would go into the LAC. That's done by Super LAC, the legislative breakfast.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for Super LAC.
Okay.
But I think we should have our guys push that, because,
Yes.
yeah.
So I'm
That's usually
hearing,
done through Super LAC, the legislative breakfast.
Yes.
so I'm hearing a work group on school safety, tying the elections
Tax caps,
and
election.
tax cap and all that stuff together. I'm hearing a work group on utility issues and relations back to our
Other groups with
other
similar
groups,
interests.
right? I like the way you put it, the priority and the technique. A third group around the creation of a TRS reserve, and maybe a fourth group to be a work group on the legislative breakfast, and then you have these updates here that we can, is that what we're saying?
Well, I sort of thought
Do we say
the
TRS
legislative
reserve?
breakfast would also go with
Super LAC.
Super LAC.
Yep. So I have to.
I mean, some of these issues are going to cross with Super LAC.
Yes. So we're good with that?
All right, so do you want to just recap that so we have it all?
Me? No.
No? All right,
I
so.
thought Marion just did.
So you're going to have a group that's going to work on
Wait, I gotta get
school
it done.
safety
Yes,
and the exemption of those costs from the tax cap and elections in school. That's going to be one group, correct?
Yeah.
And they're going to work in conjunction with Super LAC on that issue. Then you're going to have another group on the water issue, both looking at it both from our internal standpoint of being a tax exempt entity, getting taxes passed on to us, and working and having liaisons and working in conjunction with the civic associations on what they're doing in terms of the total American water picture in terms of legislative relief. Correct?
yes.
All right? And then we're going to have a third group looking at the TRS reserve. And then we're going to have a fourth group that is going to be sort of like a legislative update group.
Yeah.
Yep. And breakfast will go to Super LAC.
Breakfast goes to Super LAC.
That makes sense.
I think that's a smart framework. The only thing I guess I have questions about is the working in conjunction with the civics. I mean, I'm currently an acting president of a civic, trying to get out of that, but seems to not be happening as
Thank you.
fast. And so certainly there's a lot of effort there. I just want to make sure the civics have a lot of different directions and a lot of good information. Sharing information, liaising with them, going back and forth is important. Working in conjunction, I just want to make sure that we don't empower LAC to somehow have other.
No, collaboratively would have been, was the word I used initially. That probably was a better word. Working collaboratively so that we're not at cross purposes with the civics and that we understand their efforts and what the school can do, the
And
district can do to
likewise, I say.
further their efforts and what they could do to assist us in our efforts on American water.
Makes good
I
sense.
think that makes a lot of sense. Certainly, yeah. I
Right,
think,
because I don't think the school district has a mandate per se to try to get municipal water. We have a mandate to protect our
That is-
tax funds in this crazy scheme.
Right.
That is correct. And although I think we've evolved past the initial iteration of how this all went down, where we were all just shocked this was all happening, and now we've somehow sadly become more used to the situation. But I think the opposition between various groups and the school and the community lost sight of the fact that we're in this together.
And I mean,
Maybe-
I'm sorry.
I would say maybe not necessarily from the same exact viewpoint, but certainly with the same community-based goals. I think that working collaboratively, as you said, is a good way to foster
It's a
that.
good way to put it. And we've talked sort of exclusively about the civics when our actual efforts in the courts are much more tied up with what the village is doing.
Right, but I think the civics also tie into the village because you have Bruce Kennedy from Seacliff that's in the civics, and you have a couple of our, in
He's in the water
Seacliff.
group. He's on
and,
the civics.
Yeah. Okay, are we
We're good. Is there other old business, though?
I just wanted to remind that we had an issue on old business that I brought up about how we bid out the fine and performing arts. There was another item on the agenda tonight. The costuming,
You're talking about
the
the costume,
scenery.
piano?
Today we had the piano. It's all the stuff that we do in the fine and performing arts, how these people that are approving are selected, what kind of process is involved. I'm really more interested in the process than in the entity or person.
Yeah, I apologize. That was, I let that one slip. We'll get
No,
on that.
that's what I'm reminding you.
Thank you.
Anything this in new business? That will do to you.
Oh, sure.
Is there other old business?
Yeah, just a follow-up from the last meeting. And Peter, I know you had included it in your update with the issue that I had brought up last time regarding a committee looking at enrollment and a way of creating greater equity there.
Yes.
I looked through the policy book, and I could not find where that was. I think you said it should go through the policy committee. Do you know if that was in the 5,000s? I know, right, you don't have it in front of you. I looked through.
I don't, Tim might have to look.
Okay, yeah, so if you could get back to me on that, where I could find that, I'd appreciate it.
Old business? New business? I have one exciting bit of new business. I'm just told, no one has to do anything except, Peter, Olivia, other people. We got a letter, we got an audit initiation letter from the New York State Joint Commission on Public Ethics saying we had been randomly selected and they wish to look at the reports that we have to file, that lobbyists and their clients have to file. And so they gave us,
Yeah, it's due November 15th.
they said
so
we had
we'll be working
14
on it.
days. Yes, sounded very
Yeah,
exciting.
we'll definitely work on it next week.
It did not seem alarming, that's just
No.
FYI.
Disclosure.
We have to.
And since we have the LIPA issue and
Right,
we have lobbyists, I mean,
Right.
it was a pretty easy target. Who's surprised?
We might be kind of small fry for something like this, but it's a legitimate request. And, Olivia loves doing things like that, is my understanding,
I'll
yes.
take care of that.
She'll enjoy it. And yeah, but they gave us 14 days to respond, and they told us that they wanted.
You can get an extension if you need.
We don't, we'll be fine.
This one.
Very, very quick new business. So earlier this year, we had a fantastic tour of the facilities, great tour of the facilities. Building leaders, custodians, administration, fantastic. I have never seen the transportation facility, and we are going to be, part discussing it in our, in budget season and all that. Is there a way to organize something that is an incredibly stripped down version of that, where we can see what that transportation facility is without having to involve 12 different people who are awesome, but, can get to have dinner with their families?
Right, we all get to drive a school bus.
Through the car wash, through the bus wash. That's what I really want to see how the bus wash works.
So, this is a true story.
We're not licensed properly.
Precisely. Did I ask Olivia? What did I ask if I could do?
You don't have the license.
That's right. I wanted to drive the bus because for opening day, this is a true story. For opening day,
You have to have a different license. You have to have a commercial license.
I know.
Oh, no, you have to have a special license.
For opening day, I wanted to do like a carpool karaoke on the bus to welcome the teachers back. And so in order to do that, I needed to drive the bus. And so I asked Olivia, and she said, no.
Absolutely not.
So I was
They
kind of
put a
like,
fan on to blow your hair and you just
I
go
didn't
to the
even,
steering
I
wheel.
tried, and I tried
Keep
to,
it still.
I tried to do a run around and talk to Michelle Hall. She told me no. Everybody told me no. So I was like the pigeon. So the simple answer to your question is
Dave's scaled down.
yes. I will happily.
Okay.
Okay. Go see the
I will say, I went to sell uniforms to Southwest Airlines, and about a half hour in, I found myself flying a flight simulator. So you say no bus driving, but well.
That I can't help you with. I'm sorry.
Watch the window on the flight simulator.
All right. So who else would like to?
I would love to do that.
I'm desperate to see it.
No, the tour
Oh,
of the
yes, that
bus
too,
depot.
but for now, the bus
So
depot.
Dave, Lisa, and Sarah.
But again, it
You
can
can
be
put
quick.
me on the list. I don't know if I'll make it or not. Depends on when you're going.
We're all going to fill up our cars with gas.
No, you are not.
The facility tours, the facilities tour. Oh, to go down there?
What'd you say?
The facility tour.
So what? You
Is there other new business? Other new business? What?
BOCES, Budget Advisory.
I was looking
right
at that
there.
note, but somehow believed it was a note.
That is traditionally the province of the new members.
You were correct. So, Nassau BOCES develops and adopts approximately 30 administrative budgets each year, one for each of its programs or operating units. Every year, Nassau BOCES invites our component districts to appoint a representative to our budget review committee to assist in the development of our 2019-20 budgets.
Welcome to the
Your
board.
board's representative may be one of your own members. Budget orientation is going to be held on Thursday, December 20th at 7 p.m. at their regularly scheduled board meeting at their place in Garden City. And then it says specific budget's going to be reviewed January 7th, January 31, also in the evening. And then we all vote. You raising your hand?
Yeah. Forward me the information. I'd be happy to.
Thank you. I'll split it.
You split it with me? Okay.
Thank you, guys.
For your gracious volunteering out of the blue without prompting.
Want to take a picture of this?
Great. Okay. Anything
Thank you,
else?
Betty. I mean, really, I have literally written it here, and I have it sitting here, and I just want to talk about the audit. Thank you. Anything else? I graciously.
They just want one, but so he and I could split it.
I don't see why not.
Why not?
Yeah.
Betty's not.
They have to catch up.
I don't think they'll even notice.
We need one.
Thank you, guys.
Need a motion.
Motion adjourned.
Motion to
I
adjourn.
said I graciously make a motion to adjourn. I moved.
No, we need a motion to adjourn.
That's all right.
Did anybody second it?
Second.
Did
All
anybody?
in favor.
Ah, gracias.
We're not usually